was forbidden. There was a story where Churchill had said, he didn't want people to cower.
It's so lovely to meet you.
Pleasure.
So my name's Olivia and I'm with Cineworld.
Hi, Olivia.
Hi, and we'll be bringing Blitz to the big screen. It's an absolute delight to be here and talk to you today. And I wanted to firstly say thank you for making this movie. I actually grew up in East London, so it was really significant kind of seeing the impact that the war had. And I grew up in one of the kind of few Victorian houses left on my street, so you can really see the damage that's been done and the rebuild that's been done. And what I found really interesting as well is that the landscape of London, it's changed a lot, but there's also a lot of stuff still standing and a lot of stuff that's similar. And I wanted to know, what were the most important things for you to capture when kind of visualising your London in this film?
I think the community, that was the most important thing for me, the people, the camaraderie, the togetherness, and the sort of determination of these people. One of the images that comes to mind when you ask me that question is the women in the munitions factory. Yeah. These images which have never been seen before, on film. Where the front line were these women making these bombs. I mean, that was one of the most proudest days on set, actually, ever, making a movie with 450 women. It was amazing. So yeah, I would say the community.
I really felt the female empowerment throughout the movie, actually. Like seeing that, there's a lot of talk now, I think, quite often about how women were such a big part of the war efforts, and I think you showed that in a really...
Yeah, it was the beginning of a certain kind of liberation. Because again, you get women who are together for the first time and in a workforce and understanding their power. Yeah. And they're going home with their wages, and they're making their own decisions and making things better. So there was no going back after that.
Yeah, that's it. There was that line where one of the characters said, we earn our own wage, we can buy our own drinks, and I thought that was great.
Absolutely. But I have it anyway.
Yeah, I'll still take the drink. Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And that sense of community that you talk about, having grown up in East London, I still feel like is there as well, because there are still so many communities kind of in little bubbles in London.
Sure.
The tube stations were quite a big part of the film as well, and how they were used as shelters. And tube stations now, they still look very similar to how they would have.
They are similar.
Yeah.
They haven't changed.
Literally, apart from the digital screens everywhere, but apart from that, they are the same. They capture the same kind of feeling when you walk onto them. And I wondered why it was so important to you to bring in the aspect of them being used as shelters within the war.
Because people fought for the right to shelter there. I mean, again, it was forbidden. Yeah, it was forbidden. There was a story where Churchill had said, he didn't want people to cower, so therefore that's why they were closed. Okay. And therefore, people fought to get into the underground. So you had these it's the idea that now everyone went to the underground, it was safe. But, oh no, people fought to get it. So I love the idea again with the community that they fought for shelter, and that was great.
And in the film, you can really see that community coming together and fighting for that right, because they needed somewhere to be safe. I mean, the story focuses on one family kind of made up of 3 generations. Where did you get the inspiration for these characters, and was that based on research that you did for the film, or was it kind of imagined?
Well, some research, but again, for example, the first person, of course, was George. I found when I was doing research, I did this series of films called Small Acts, and in my research, I saw this young, black child, in a large overcoat and large suitcase with a cap on the railway on the station platform. I thought, what's his story? Yeah. So then I sort of had this idea of his family, and I had this idea of, I love the idea of obviously music being a center of to corral and to sort of lull people in that particular time frame, because it was the thing that lifted people. So then I thought of Paul McCartney's father and that, upright piano and that being the center of the house. And I thought, okay, Gerald is this, he's a musician, and then of Saoirse, of course, and the family came together very quickly. Yeah. But also when I brought those 3 actors together for the first time, there was a real love and appreciation of each other. As I said, the 66-year-old man, Paul, a 29-year-old woman, Saoirse, a 9-year-old child who just respected and loved each other, or just they loved playing with each other. They loved to play. Yeah. And I thought, oh my goodness, so there wasn't much for me to do afterward to have into action. So that's how it came about, and it was beautiful to see it taking shape as we went along. It was great. You can't make that up.
No, it was a really beautiful relationship they had. I thought
it was real.
It felt real watching it, and the way that the story was portrayed, because you saw it through the eyes of a child, you saw it through the eyes of an older man, and you saw it through the eyes of a mother. Why was that so important to have it shown from different perspectives? I think 3 different generations, obviously, and I think that's interesting. And again, these, these are civilians. They're not, often we've seen that movie 1,010 times of men fighting, in a khaki somewhere in a field somewhere, if it's North Africa or France or wherever in the world. But back at home, I wanted to see what and again, these decisions are made by these people, and whoever leaders or whoever they are, if it's whoever heads of state or whatever, and we have to deal with it. Yeah. So I needed to focus on those people and how they had to navigate their way through this unfortunate situation they find themselves in. Yeah, and the individual personalities and what they're going through really came across, and the kind of, I really enjoyed, there were some really innocent moments of George just being a child, and in parallel with what was going on in the world I thought you portrayed that really beautifully. So, thank you. Something we just touched on earlier, which I feel like I just have to talk about, is the score and the soundscapes and the music. I study music. It's a really big part of my life. It's something I always focus on when I'm watching a film, and it stood out to me so much. Hans Zimmer, an incredible musician. How did you know he was the right person for this and to work on with the score, and how did you approach working on this? Well, I worked with Hans. What was interesting about Hans, innately had an idea of what to do, because his mother lived through the Blitz in London. She was evacuated from Germany, lived through the Blitz here, in fact, in Marylebone. And then, unfortunately, Hans's father died when he was 5 years old. So he had an understanding of this mother and son relationship, because it was him and his mother. So he had an understanding, and you could feel in the score, he had this idea we spoke about of having it in the perspective of George. Of course, the movie is made in his perspective, so the score is made in his perspective as such. But we see it sort of, the score sort of, the orchestration and the creation as it moves along as George moves along. It sort of evolves. But also, I was working with Nicholas Britell on like Winter's Coat, for example, the song that Saoirse sings, which is beautiful. So again, it's the same double act with 12 Years a Slave, where Heinz does the score, but Nick Britell does the actual in a sort of music within the actual film. So it was great. Yeah, it's really interesting you talk about that kind of that music within and the overall score, because I felt like this constant heartbeat throughout that was made by, I noticed in that kind of shot in the munitions factory, that some of the sounds were made by the kind of clanking of different materials, and that went into the soundscape. And yes. I was really, I felt, kind of on the edge of my seat the whole way through. Women at work. Yeah, you really did. And I stepped out the cinema and kind of just stood there for a bit in silence, just so I could think about what I'd just seen. And I was just wondering, how did you decide on the significance of how the music was going to be a part of the film? Was that discussions that were had really early on, or did they kind of come in a bit later? I think they came in tandem. I think that was the thing, because again, there was a seed that was planted a long time ago, but when you're actually doing it, there's an immediacy and a reaction to it. And I think that because of the unfortunate situation we find ourselves now, kind of helped in a way of the urgency. Yes. I mean, this is a film for me which is about now. It's obviously we made it in 2000. It was portrayed in 1940, but actually the movie is about now. Yeah. And actually, what this movie is about, in a way, is about love. Yeah. Only thing worth living for, only thing worth dying for. Within all the nonsense we find ourselves in, the only thing that's worth of any value is love, and that's what this film's about. That was really beautiful, and that's. Oh God, I feel like I might cry from that actually, because when I walked away, there was a sentence that really stood out to me. That was "Make a wish, one wish," and I feel like you've just kind of summed that up with what you've just said as well. I want to say thank you for that. So it's like a really nice place to end the interview there. Great, thank you so much for having me.
make a wish. One wish?